Earlier here at the Reagan Defense Forum, I sat down with Republican Senator Joni Ernst, the first female combat veteran elected to the Senate, who's now a member of the Armed Services Committee, and also Michèle Flournoy, former Undersecretary of Defense under President Obama. And we began with a growing crisis on Ukraine's border. Senator Michelle, welcome to Fox News Sunday.
Thank you very much.
Senator, what do you think Vladimir Putin is up to here? Do you really think that he intends to invade Ukraine? And what should President Biden tell him on Tuesday? I mean, we're not going to go to war with Russia over Ukraine.
It's hard to know what Vladimir Putin is thinking and what his true intentions are, but we do see a very aggressive action on his part, amassing his troops on the Ukrainian border. So we must prepare for the worst, not knowing what those intentions are. I do think that President Biden needs to be very clear and very strong in his message to Vladimir Putin. He needs to say to Vladimir Putin that we are no longer going to allow you to continue with the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. We need you to know and understand that we will defend Ukraine. We will provide them assistance. He needs to make that very clear.
Here is Secretary of State Blinken this week talking about the threat of Russia and Ukraine. Take a look.
We've made it clear to the Kremlin that we will respond resolutely, including with a range of high-impact economic measures that we've refrained from using in the past.
Michelle, that's what we keep hearing from both the Biden administration and from the European Union, talk of economic sanctions, talk of political sanctions. Pretty much it's obvious, although not explicit, the military option is off the table. That's never stopped Putin before.
Well, I think what the administration is actively considering with our allies is an escalating set of sanctions that go beyond what's been done before. I'm sure they are looking at sanctioning the banking system, sanctioning the energy sector, possibly cutting off Russia from the SWIFT system, which enables all of their international financial transactions. So they're looking at much more serious means, and my expectation would be that on Tuesday during the call, President Biden will lay out to President Putin, these are the kinds of things you're going to face, a much greater level of pain than anything you faced over Crimea or what have you. Ukraine is a sovereign nation. The invasion of Ukraine would be, and particularly going beyond what Putin did before, would be, a very serious breach of international security and would merit a huge response, not just from the U.S., but from Europe and the international community.
Senator Ernst, I want to pick up on something you said earlier. If there's one thing that Vladimir Putin really wants now, it's the completion of the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline to Germany. Here's what Senator Tom Cotton, one of your Republican colleagues, had to say about that this week. Take a look.
Now we're in a situation where all of Western Europe is hooked on German gas, and Vladimir Putin is about to invade Ukraine, and the best we can get is stern words.
Senator, what do you think of the chances that Congress could override the president and block the pipeline, and that you could get Democrats and Republicans joining together to override President Biden?
Well, I certainly can't speak for the House, Chris, but I do believe that there is a coalescence around these types of actions in the United States Senate. Democrats are concerned, Republicans are concerned, and what we don't want to do is allow President Putin to continue with the pipeline, especially as he is preparing, perhaps, to invade Ukraine. So we do have to push back on that, and I think that there is a large group of United States senators that will push back on Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing fight in the Senate, Michelle. President Biden is trying to stop Congress from blocking the pipeline. Is it time, in this kind of situation, you talked about taking sanctions that haven't been taken so far, is it time for President Biden to reverse course and threaten to block the pipeline?
I think the combination of sanctions that are being considered would be even more powerful than the signal of blocking that pipeline. And remember, what Putin's trying to do here, one of his objectives is to divide the United States and Europe. So we have got, if we're going to maintain unity, transatlantic unity, to implement very severe sanctions, we've got to work with our European partners, and that includes Germany. And so I would urge the Senate to think about that if you get satisfaction on blocking Nord Stream 2, you might actually undermine the effectiveness of the sanctions that the president is would be hopefully threatening to put in place against Putin.
There are other foreign policy threats. Senator Ernst, China is involved in a huge military buildup now, both on the ground and also in space, this new hypersonic missile. How should we deal with the growing threat from China?
There are so many ways that we should be dealing with the threat in China, whether it is in the cyberspace, cyber domain, whether it is disruption to their Belt and Road initiatives all around the globe. Certainly their buildup of man-made islands in the South China Sea, their incursions on Taiwan and Taiwanese airspace. All of this we can do in a number of manners, but of course, militarily, making sure that we're maintaining freedom of navigation is extremely important. Making sure that we're countering any cyber threats to our systems, banking, our utilities, and so forth, pushing back on that. But also a very clear message from the president to President Xi would be extremely helpful. I think we had a lost opportunity when President Biden requested to visit with President Xi, and yet President Xi is the one that seemed to take center stage and maintain his dominance. We have to be very strong and clear on our message to China that while we want to engage you in trade and other activities, we can't allow any nefarious types of activities.
Finally, Iran, Senator Ernst, you have made it clear, so I'm not going to ask you about it, that you think it's a big mistake for the U.S. to get back into the Iran nuclear deal. Michelle, you know, we're talking about a situation that has changed so dramatically since President Trump pulled out of the deal. Iran is now up to 60% enrichment of uranium. It has an array of advanced centrifuges. Is it too late to go back to the deal? Has the genie already gone out and left the bottle, and it's impossible to put it back inside?
Yeah, well, I think what the mess we're seeing today is a result of the U.S. withdrawal from the deal, which started Iran back on the
But we are where we are.
But we are where we are. You know, I wish I could say that I was optimistic that we could get back to the deal, but all indications coming out of the negotiations are that that remains a remote possibility. So now we're in a situation of having to figure out with our allies, how do we deal with an Iran that is positioning itself to race for a nuclear weapon and continuing to support terrorism throughout the region. So Iran is going to be reasserting itself as a bigger problem for U.S. foreign policy in the coming years.
Basically, does it come down to we're going to have to let Israel handle the problem for us?
Well, I don't think we should have this all be on Israel's shoulders. I think the United States and our other partners in the region, along with Israel, need to come up with a new approach if the negotiations
do you think it's reversible, or do you think Iran is now just on the path?
Oh, it's always reversible. The key is how do you really affect their calculus? And I think this regime has sort of dug in its heels, again, hoping to split us from our allies and get others to compromise with them. And we've just got to keep working the problem. But I'm not hopeful in the near term.
Michèle Flournoy, Senator Joni Ernst, thank you both so much. It's a busy and dangerous world out there.
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.